Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on YouTube. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi, your evangelist of the imagination, and as John Campea calls me, your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett. And I want to welcome you to 2022, also the fourth season of Robservations. Welcome to all you members, all you imagination connoisseurs, and members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. It is a new year. COVID is spiking. I know more people that have the Omicron variant than ever had, well, regular COVID, than the Delta variant. So be careful out there. I don't know what's going to happen or how it's going to happen, but just stay safe. But anyway, it's a new year. And there's not a whole lot of entertainment news out there that I thought was interesting in covering. But you know, as many of you have heard me talk about, I love Richard Rushfield's The Ankler newsletter. It is a great industry newsletter. I know my friend Dave Hargrove is not a big fan of Richard Rushfield's, let's call it tone, but I'm a fan of his, and I eagerly open up his emails wondering what they're going to be about. Well, today, it wasn't the normal bill of fare that I usually get from Mr. Rushfield and the Ankler. There was an essay in the newsletter about Norman Mailer. Now, a lot of you are going to ask yourselves, who is Norman Mailer? Well, Norman Mailer, I would call him a towering pop culture figure in the 20th century. He was a writer. He was a filmmaker. He was a political activist. He did many different things. He even directed movies. Many people would say he shouldn't have, but he directed a 1987 movie called Tough Guys Don't Dance that stars Ryan O'Neal. And if you want to see something from it, look up the clip of Ryan O'Neal in Tough Guys Don't Dance. Oh, man. Oh, God. Oh, man. I'm sure it's on YouTube. You can find it with a cursory glance. Now, I, of course, will tell you that my first experience, I read his 1980 book, The Executioner's Song. And The Executioner's Song has been turned into a movie, but it was about Gary Gilmore. And Gary Gilmore demanded he be put to death. He demanded they kill him because he had committed murders in Utah. And let me read this. After the U.S. Supreme Court upheld a new series of death penalty statutes in the 1976 decision Gregg versus Georgia, he became the first person in almost 10 years to be executed in the United States. And Tommy Lee Jones in the TV movie, the 1982 TV movie that was quite good, played Gary Gilmore. That was my first experience reading Norman Mailer. Now, let me read. It'll be easier. I'm just going to go to the Wikipedia about Norman Mailer. Mailer wrote 12 novels in 59 years. Let's see, he wrote his fourth novel, An American Dream, as a serial in Esquire magazine over 8 months in 1964. The Executioner's Song was in 1980. He wrote a novel, Ancient Evenings, and it was about Egypt in the 20th dynasty, about 1100 BC. Harlow's Ghost, his longest novel, appeared in 1991, and he received good reviews. And as a journalist from the mid-1950s, Norman Mailer became known for his countercultural essays. In 1955, he co-founded The Village Voice and was initially an investor and silent partner, but later he wrote a column called Quickly, a column for slow readers, from January to April in 1956. His articles, published in this column, 17 in total, were important in his development of the philosophy of hip, or what he would call American existentialism, and allowed him to discover his penchant for journalism. His famous essay, The White Negro, fleshes out the hipster figure who stands in opposition of the forces that seek debilitating conformity in American society. It is believed to be among the most anthologized and controversial essays of the post-war period. Mailer republished it in 1959 in Advertisements for Myself, which he described as the first work I wrote with a style I could call my own. The reviews are positive, and most commentators refer to it as his breakthrough work. In 1960, Mailer wrote Superman Comes to the Supermarket for Esquire magazine, an account of the emergence of John F. Kennedy during the Democratic Party convention. The essay was an important breakthrough for the new journalism of the 1960s, but when the magazine's editors changed the title to Superman Comes to the Supermart, Mailer was enraged and would not write for Esquire for years. The magazine later apologized. He marched on the Pentagon in October of 1967. He was even convinced to become a activist and run for, I think it was he was either a Democratic congressperson. I mean, people like Gloria Steinem wanted him to run. And as a filmmaker, he made experimental films. He acted in one of my favorite movies, Milos Forman's Ragtime. He worked with Sergio Leone, which is amazing. He also starred alongside writer-feminist Germaine Greer in the movie Town Bloody Hall, which was shot in 71 but not released until 79. And he was going to be in a Jean-Luc Godard film. I mean, he's had a crazy, crazy life. And he's I think, one of the great American literary figures of the 20th century. Now, why am I talking about Norman Mailer? I'm sure you're wondering. Well, today's Ankler magazine, or Ankler newsletter, Richard Rushfield's Ankler, which is usually about the entertainment business, movies, television, streaming, what have you. I've read articles before. Did not have the normal bill of fare that Richard Rushfield had. And instead, he published an essay from Michael Wolff talking about Random House canceling a book of essays and work that was going to celebrate what would have been Norman Mailer's 100th birthday. And they're not going to publish it anymore. And why are they not going to publish it? Because of his famous essay, The White Negro, that was published in 1957, which, by the way, up until I read this newsletter, I had not read. So I was unfamiliar with what the essay was. But I'd like to read, first of all, what Michael Wolff wrote about Norman Mailer. With slow-mo hammer-dropping predictability, Norman Mailer's longtime publisher has recently informed the Mailer family that it has canceled plans to publish a collection of his political writings to mark the centennial of his birth in 2023, confirms the film producer Michael Mailer, the author's oldest son. The backdoor apologies at Random House include, as the proximate cause, you hardly have to look hard in Mailer's work to find offenses against contemporary doctrine and respectability, a junior staffer's objection to the title of Mailer's 1957 essay, The White Negro, a psychosexual druggy precursor and model for much of the psychosexual druggy literature that became popular in the 1960s. A Random House source also cites the objections of feminist and cultural gadfly Roxane Gay. Her name, however, may have been employed as merely a generic type of objector, as in she or someone equally cause-minded who might object. Indeed, she protested in an email that she never voiced a view that she knows next to nothing about Norman Mailer, and that already eliminating him from the modern canon, she has never read among the most consequential figures of that most consequential, but yes, mostly white and male, post-war American literary generation. With Random House having previously gobbled up most of the publishing industry, including with it many of Mailer's former publishers, and having most recently agreed to acquire Simon & Schuster, one of its remaining rivals, there aren't many options left for a major new publication of the Mailer essays, many of which have helped reshape modern journalism. A public brawler, his physical altercations have involved punching, headbutting, biting, sometimes on television, and in 1961, stabbing his then-wife with a penknife during a drunken party. And radical contrarian, whose themes have included the challenges of masculinity and his own tenuous and often violent relationships with women, the novelist, journalist, playwright, filmmaker, and one-time candidate for New York mayor, so it wasn't a congressman, he ran for New York mayor, has, well before his death in 2007, worn a "Cancel Me" sign. He has flashed even brighter than those around the necks of his literary contemporaries, including Philip Roth for sexism and bad relations with women, Saul Bellow for same plus his conservative politics, Vladimir Nabokov for Lolita, J.D. Salinger for weirdness, sexually and otherwise, John Updike and John Cheever for unrelenting waspiness, William Styron for appropriating the life of slave rebellion leader Nat Turner, among others. All of their publishers await the next cultural boil, each author just an objection away from disappearing. But Mailer, whose sins and obsessions, dark, comic, revealing, have always been his subject, and whose centennial collection has been uneventfully underway for many months, helps make the curious point that it isn't, in fact, the work that causes concern, but rather the prospect of controversy itself that scares corporate entities away. Trying to avoid more controversy as a byproduct of trying to avoid controversy, no senior editor or executive at Random House was willing to talk about the Mailer project, referring all comment to a publicity department representative who issued a non-denial, saying that, although agreement has been reached with Mailer's estate, the book had an editor, and Random House had agreed to foot the bill to pay Mailer's biographer, J. Michael Lennon, Norman Mailer, A Double Life, published to acclaim in 2013, to select the essays. A final contract had not been signed, therefore the book was not technically canceled. Instead, it was not acquired, the publisher's fig leaf of virtue. You live only until an objection scares the people whose job is more and more to avoid objections. That new primary executive function. A recent addition to the writer-editor-reader relationship is something called a sensitivity reader. That is someone of diverse background who can advise on dicey cultural matters, whom writers are now encouraged to consult. Needless to say, Norman Mailer never had a sensitivity reader. Hachette, one of Random House's few rivals, bought Woody Allen's autobiography for a big sum, and then plotted to avoid controversy by publishing the book in secret, binding him to a strict non-disclosure agreement. But when Allen's son and mortal antagonist Ronan Farrow got wind of the project and objected, Hachette immediately washed its hands of the book. In other words, it had no problem with the book itself, just with the threats of an uproar over it. The Allen book was subsequently published by Skyhorse, an intrepid independent publisher, but with limited market reach. Controversy kills. Or anyway, life is too short, the time's too weird, and profit too fleeting to suffer for it. This has essentially become corporate policy throughout creative industries, unspoken and unwritten, but hardly secret. A senior most executive at a top-most television buyer recently wrote a senior-most agent who had proposed a project the executive labeled as too contemporary, laying out what certainly sounds like clear policy. The network, he wrote, remains resolutely committed to staying as far away from the politics and journalism business in all of its forms as possible. Not because we don't believe in it, but because we believe it is not our domain. We've dabbled there, but continue to believe that our best role is either to support fiction or to support a kind of retrospective true narrative that has the benefit of enough time for the heat of political and cultural conflict to have dissipated and for an audience to be open to a more nuanced, broadly contextualized perspective. 20 years out, the executive suggested, was the last time necessary before a controversial subject could be addressed. If one senior-most executive at a top-most buyer in a heavily consolidated industry is saying avoid all controversy, reasonably most others, to the limited extent that there are others, are feeling the same. Who doubts that the upshot of Netflix's tortured defense of Dave Chappelle is not going to be more Dave Chappelle's, but fewer? The move by Penguin Random House, the world's largest publishing group, to disappear Norman Mailer, or at least not call attention to the fact that it continues to publish the Mailer backlist, might curiously be seen or should be seen as part of the background of another controversy in which the company is spending much of its corporate time. Weeks ago, the Justice Department sued Penguin Random House and Simon & Schuster in an effort to prevent the two companies from completing their $2 billion merger. This is a particularly stinging development for Random House, owned by the German publishing giant Bertelsmann, because in order to win the auction for Simon & Schuster, Random House people knowledgeable about the deal report had to agree to a nearly unprecedented size breakup fee in the event the deal failed to be completed. Hence, Random House might be expected to fight the Department of Justice to the last appeal. Antitrust suits are often initiated because it is politically impossible to ignore that merely big has become ludicrously behemoth and utterly shape-shifting. But the particulars of antitrust law mean such suits are almost exclusively fought on a nuanced economic basis rather than as a function of the dark shadow these corporate monsters cast. The government has to prove that the lack of competition means harm at the checkout counter for the consumer, or that gross market dominance causes other unfair injuries in the marketplace. In an already darkly shadowed world, Random House, on its part, can be expected to reasonably argue, what do you mean big? What about Silicon Valley? We're just a much smaller fish only trying to survive. So here, then, is a further argument for the benefit of Department of Justice lawyers who might not have read Norman Mailer. FYI, one of the great reading experiences of a lifetime. A lack of competition among gatekeepers leads to less choice and more limits and a narrowing of risk, taste, and sensibility. And when the winds are harsh, greater shelter for the cowardly. A world without Norman Mailer, this new intellectual nanny state, surely harms the literary consumer. I read that and I'm like, a new intellectual nanny state. I think that's where we're at. And I find it quite distressing, to be honest. I don't know where this really has come from. When I was growing up, I loved to find troublesome ideas, problematic novels, watch movies that I probably wasn't supposed to see. I like to read books about those things. I love to get all different kinds of perspectives. And let me tell you, my movie collection certainly represents that. Now, I liked reading about people that have problematic outputs or problematic outlooks on life. That's how I learn things. That's how I learned perhaps how not to be. Or perhaps that's how I learned to even be a little bit more open-minded. I don't understand what's happening in our culture. I don't understand why all of a sudden, if somebody has a point of view that you disagree with, that anybody disagrees with, why is it their job to go after that person, to destroy the person, and not come back with a counter argument against the ideas that that person has that they find problematic? The ideas aren't going to go away. You might be able to get rid of a person that doesn't have the same kind of outlook that you do, but the outlook's still there. There are other people that are going to feel the way that that person does. And what I don't understand is, why is our discourse going away? Bad ideas won't last. It might take, well, in the case of, say, slavery in the United States, hundreds of years. But eventually, it'll go away. Bad ideas do not stand the test of time, because we are human beings. And hey, no one is worse to other human beings than we are. We're a horrible bunch of folks. However, I do believe, ultimately, that eventually human beings will figure that shit out. Hey, we might leave Europe a scorched mess or millions of skulls in a body pit somewhere, but eventually, maybe we'll come around. I'd like to believe that we would, because that's what I've seen in my lifetime. I've seen people, well, hash it out. Until lately, I see that the intellectual rigor and the intellectual curiosity and the intellectual, well, any desire to be intellectual at all is falling by the wayside. And I don't understand it, that people are going after other people instead of the ideas they have, as if by getting rid of somebody, they take their ideas with them, never to be heard of or seen again. Well, that's absurd. It also shows that the people that are doing this pushing aside, they're not that smart. They're loud, they cause problems, but you know what? By getting rid of a person, you can't get rid of an idea. And if you don't have a better idea that's going to replace the bad idea that you're bitching and moaning and complaining about, well, then where are you? If you push that person off the stage of the world, have you created something better? And as a matter of fact, I think that's the most disappointing part of all of this. Let's get rid of a bad essay that was written almost, 1957. What is that? I mean, do the math. What is that, 65 years ago? Is that where we're at now? We can't accept an article called "The White Negro" because at the time Norman Mailer was writing that. That's what predominantly many people, Black Americans, were called. What do you want to do? Pretend that essay was not written 65 years ago? Do we want to pretend that no history happened? Can we not delve into all of the bad ideas people have had? Why are bad ideas so, horrible? Bring the bad ideas out to the light. Let's expose these ideas. Let's talk about these ideas. If you want to shout down people that have bad ideas, that's fine. But you're not getting rid of bad ideas if you get rid of the people espousing those ideas, because the ideas are still here. They're still here. And I fear for a world in which people think that if they just scream loudly and decide to not allow somebody to speak on campus, somebody that they don't like, for whatever reason, they think that's an accomplishment. That's a cheap and easy way out. It is far more difficult to come up with an idea of your own. Come up with an idea that fights the bad idea that you don't like. And not just saying, I don't like this person because they said this, and I feel sad, or I'm offended that this person had an idea. Who gives a fuck if you're offended? I don't. What I'd rather have you do is do something on your own, create something, make something, get out there and combat those ideas with ideas of your own. Let the people exist. Let the work exist. Don't go and try and not get an article that was 65 years ago old or written back in 1957 and not publish an important writer's work because one essay of theirs you objected to a word in the title or the two words in the title that you think is somehow bad, but it's an essay you've never read, nor if you read it would you even understand it because you didn't live in America in 1957. Why do that? Why try and destroy the past? Why pretend that bad ideas have never been espoused by people? I'm kind of frankly, I am sick and tired of reading the ill-conceived, screaming, blathering, yelling at people, especially on college campuses or people that should know better. I mean, if you don't like someone's ideas, rather than just scream about them, why not come up with ideas of your own? Make something, create something. Dig inside yourself and bring something forth that didn't yet exist. That's a lot more impressive than if you're just going to go and bitch and moan and complain and not get a book that Norman Mailer, a man who was very important in the 20th century, at least in literary and journalism circles. I mean, you don't even know who he is. You just heard a title of one of his essays and now a book celebrating his 100 years here on the planet, or what would have been his 100 years on the planet. What's going to happen is that analysis, that collection is going to be lost to us. It's never going to get published. And I don't think the world is a better place when books aren't published. I don't think the very foundations of our democracy, the bedrock of our culture, is the idea that we can speak our minds. And now we have a whole generation of people that are telling us we can't. And you know what I would say to those people? Fuck you. Until you have something of your own to say, don't tell other people what they can and can't say. That is censorship. That is cowardly. And it shouldn't be allowed to happen. And I think we need to start fighting harder against it, especially on platforms like YouTube. We need to have intelligent debate. We need to have people coming together on opposite sides of a spectrum and learning how to speak to each other. And better yet, understand their own ideas before they start spewing them out like some broken fire hose. I mean, come on now. What are we going to do? What do we expect of ourselves as we move into 2022? I think we expect or should expect better. I would like to encourage everyone this year to speak up, not against other people, but to speak up with your own ideas, your own positions, and understand them and defend them and be able to really talk in such a way that you're not just part of the out there in the ether. Talk and espouse your opinions to the point where people stop and listen to you and think, hey, you make a lot of sense. Now, what do you think we can do to move forward and combat the bad ideas? Without just screaming and yelling and bitching and moaning and telling other people, oh, your words hurt me. Do they? Do they? Well, I think there's a lot worse things that can hurt you. I know. I mean, I've been jumped and beaten up by 4 dudes at one point in my life. And I'll tell you, that hurt far worse than anyone's words. They might not have resonated for as long as unkind words do, but at the time they hurt more. I can promise you that. But anyway, I just thought this was interesting. And I think about this a lot. And I don't want to live in a world where someone's going to come for our books and come for our movies and come for our records and come for the ideas and the magazines and the essays and the history that is so vital to our continued understanding of our own existence. It's not good for anyone. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say. And I want to once again thank Richard Rushfield for publishing that article. Now, for anyone who's interested, Here is the essay in question. Here is Norman Mailer's essay. And I encourage everyone to read it because it's pretty interesting and an interesting perspective. Am I endorsing what Norman Mailer has to say here? No. But it talks about a period of time. I was always interested in things like the Beat Generation and bebop culture. And I'm a huge jazz fan. And I would encourage you, if you read this essay, to go and also watch the documentary The Birth of Cool, which is a documentary that's currently on Netflix about Miles Davis. And I think it would go a long way toward accentuating the experience. So there you go. Anyway, let's see where we are at. We got letters. I got letters. Letters from y'all. Let's start with Mark Erickson. This is a good one. Hey, Rob. I've recently fallen into the Columbo rabbit hole on Peacock TV. I was just wondering if this classic old series has ever captured your attention. Wishing you and yours a wonderful 22. Mark, I got to tell you, and Elizabeth can tell you this. About a month ago, I started watching Columbo clips on YouTube. And they were like 10-minute chunks of the end of Columbo episodes where he finally reveals or he nails the bad people. I love Columbo. Love Columbo so very much. And not only that, one of my very favorite movies in all the world is Wim Wenders' Wings of Desire. I think it's one of the great fantasy films ever made. Now, a lot of people, if you try and go watch it, it's not going to be what you think. It's more of a tone poem, but the premise is that angels exist. The whole movie is set in pre-wall coming down Berlin in the late 80s, and it's about the friendship of two angels that have presumably been there since time immemorial, or when humanity started doing things like making libraries. And basically their job is to just watch humanity and observe what mankind does. And of course, one of the angels falls in love with a woman and decides to give up his wings. But it's done in a very poetic way, and it was shot by Henri Alecan, who is one of the great... He shot Beauty and the Beast, the original Beauty and the Beast, one of the most beautiful movies ever, one of the great black and white photographers of all time. If you've never seen Wings of Desire, and I also recommend its sequel, Far Away So Close, Wings of Desire is available on Criterion Blu-ray, and it's absolutely stunning. But check that out. But it's got a great, great connection to Peter Falk and Columbo. And I don't want to tell you what it is, but Peter Falk is definitely in the movie. So I have always loved Columbo. I think it's a great show. And it made me, I'll tell you, since I started watching these clips, I want to go back and I don't know if this is the case. I haven't really looked into it, but I'd love to get the entire series box set, hopefully restored to Blu-ray. Our next letter is from Victor Rosario Ferment, our friend from Puerto Rico. Dear Captain of the USS Imagination, don't call it a comeback. An LL Cool J reference, although we should. In 2021, we welcome back the hard science fiction movie. Some folks are content with simple pleasures. Therefore, the heady stuff, the art film, the food for thought movies, gives them a tummy ache. In the year of Dune, Eternals, and the Matrix Resurrections, we've all heard their moans. Each of these three hard science fiction movies had a philosophical core, ambition, and art on their side. Mere popcorn flicks they were not. I don't agree with every choice their directors made, but I support them. I could have used a little more screen time for Duke Leto, and shorter dream sequences. But Denis Villeneuve's Dune is still one of 2021's most remarkable cinematic achievements. Chloe Zhao's Eternals dared to be different. Its pacing and tone differed from the average MCU crowd pleaser. She gave us an Icarus, a Superman who outlived Kal-El by thousands of years and still did not give a shit about mankind. She also gave us Jack Kirby's Arishem, the Judge, and a star turn for the gorgeous Emma Chan. Lana Wachowski gave us, in The Matrix Resurrections, a sequel that valiantly did not repeat most of the franchise's main tropes, even though it replayed highlights of the original. Instead, it boldly advanced the story and the world in which it unfolded. We learned that Neo's messianic sacrifice was successful. It produced a truce between humans and artificials. We also learned that the machines disturbingly used Cypher as a human nature guideline for a resurrected Neo. He was even given that scumbag's wish list, including the juicy and delicious steak. I'm glad you picked up on that. Trinity was revived as well, and audiences got a renewed and powerful romance between two 50-somethings, something you never see in genre cinema. I suspect this is one of the sources for the hate. Very few 35 and under males daydream about what they would deem a granny. I don't know about that. Hollywood knows this and flushes down actresses like Carrie-Anne Moss when they hit their late 30s, unless they're able to produce their own films like Sandra Bullock, Jennifer Lopez, and Julia Roberts do. Male thespians usually stick around 10 or 15 years longer. This might be my favorite film of the year. I love the Doogie Howser MD actor, Neil Patrick Harris, playing a villain, the corporate brainstorming meeting, and especially Jessica Henwick as Bugs. She stole the Marvel Netflix Iron Fist show from the excruciatingly miscast Finn Jones, and also did great here. I really love to see her kick ass and smile. By the way, I keep telling everyone to give Underwater a look, the monster movie starring Kristen Stewart. I keep hearing that. Henwick is pretty good in a supporting role there, and Marco Beltrami's score is one of the best I've heard in decades. The cerebral hard sci-fi film came back in 2021. Who knows when this will happen again? I heard my name yesterday because my Post-Geek Singularity membership renewed itself. I was planning to upgrade it to the next level, but I think I'll do that as soon as I hear who won the Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival. True that. As always, thank you very much for reading my letters, and I wish you many blessings and a happy new year to you, your family, and to our worldwide imagination connoisseurs. Oh, should I say, you say brotherhood. I don't know if I can say that anymore, but that's what you wrote. Victor Rosario Fermaint, all the way from Bayamon, Puerto Rico, USA. Our next letter comes from Pedro Ferreira. Hello, Pedro. Hi, Rob. I hope you had a good Christmas and a happy New Year. My attempts to persuade people on the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook that Star Trek Generations is a Christmas movie was met with a mixed response. Yeah, I went there. Picard celebrates Christmas in the movie. Look at the U.S. release date. They knew what they were doing, releasing it for Thanksgiving. You could make the argument that Generations has parallels with It's a Wonderful Life. Picard wonders what his life would be like if he'd taken a different path, and he's shown it through the Nexus. The difference here, unlike in the Frank Capra movie, is the fantasy reality is portrayed as attractive, so Picard has to force himself to go back to reality. Generations is a Star Trek movie that sure has everything. I love it. Now, I'm aware that when I type letters, they can be kind of negative. Really, I just speak what's on my mind. I discovered one individual is so annoyed with my negativity that he fast forwards to the podcast when my letter comes up, going so far as to block me on Facebook. Really? Well, that's completely against what this entire episode of Robservations is about. I've received criticism for my views in the past, but not to the extent I've described. Imagine if people were fast forwarding through other people's letters that they disliked. I apologize for this, but I also realize I cannot lie. I wouldn't type letters that are negative if things were better in modern Hollywood. What escapes a lot of people as well is the reason I'm so critical is because my degree comes from a historical and critical background, so I'm not exaggerating when I say I'm technically more qualified to critique film and TV more than most YouTubers. That shouldn't put people off. We're all more qualified in some things than others. I'm sure they're more qualified than I am to talk about certain things as well. At the end of the day, you can't please everybody or make everyone like you. Nevertheless, it got me thinking, perhaps I need to put up my game when it comes to positivity in case my attempts at comedy go over people's heads. A film I wanted to recommend to you, Rob, which you probably have yet to see, is the 1986 sci-fi adventure Biggles, Adventure in Time, directed by John Howe, Escape to Witch Mountain. I know that someone already wrote a letter recommending this movie, but I thought I'd go into detail about it a bit more. It's a wacky and underrated movie made for a moderate budget of $7 million. If there's a movie that I'd champion, it's this one. Okay. The film is based on the Biggles Air Adventures for Kids, written by author W.E. Johns. Biggles took place during World War I and followed him as he was embarked on adventures during and after that period. He was often accompanied by his three friends, Bertie, Algie, and Ginger. Erich von Stalheim was Biggles' recurring nemesis. The Biggles creator based the adventures on his own experiences during the war. Something like 98 books aimed at kids were written by Johns before he died. It took 10 years for a movie to be made. At one point, Dudley Moore was considered until the role went to Neil Dixon. In an effort to appeal to a more modern audience as well as a global one, it was felt that the movie needed an American guide that linked Biggles via time travel. The plot is this. In modern-day New York, TV dinner catering businessman Jim Ferguson, played by Alex Hyde White, oh, that's cool, finds him uncontrollably time-traveling to World War I, 1917, to meet Biggles, Neil Dixon. It seems they are linked through time, and when one is in mortal danger, the other will appear. That seems like a pretty big change to the story there. Jim, of course, isn't too happy about that, but he realizes there are more important things than his burgeoning yuppie lifestyle to think about when in the present-day Biggles commanding officer Colonel Raymond, Peter Cushing in his last film role, tells him his mission is to help Biggles locate and destroy the Germans' new sonic sound weapon. Such a new weapon will change history, change the war, and as Raymond says, God knows what will happen to the rest of us. It begs the question, is there an evil time traveler going around changing history? We may never know. Even though the film leaves the possibility of a sequel, it was never made. They intended to make Biggles films like Bond movies. It's PG rated, so there's a bit of mild swearing and some gruesome scenes that hark back to Raiders of the Lost Ark. When released, the Biggles fans hated the movie, and from their point of view, it's not difficult to see why. Imagine you're a fan of Biggles. You've waited 10 years for a Biggles film to be made, and you've mostly ignored the spoilers because you want to be surprised on the first night of release. Instead of the film opening with a pan over merry old England with Great Escape-style music playing, instead, the film opens with a pan over Manhattan with John Anderson's Do You Want to Be a Hero disco rap song playing. It would come across to fans like a very expensive prank. No doubt, in the UK at least, the film got a lot of hate. Such was the hate, in fact, that on Biggles' internet fan boards today, you can get banned for even mentioning the movie. I suppose it wouldn't be so bad if fans had got their faithful adaptation, but they haven't, which makes it easier to pin the blame on the 1986 movie. The film didn't just flop in the UK, but ended up doing so in the market they'd hoped to build an audience in, the USA. At the time, watching it on TV during the holidays, I always thought the film was just a low-budget movie only I'd heard of. It turns out it got a huge release in the UK. It got a royal gala premiere attended by Prince Charles and Princess Diana. There was a lot of merchandise ranging from a novelization to posters to a soundtrack to a video game for home computers like the Commodore 64 and the ZX Spectrum. It's proved a divisive movie between those that loathe it and those that love it. Even today, with the hyped HD restoration release, half hated, watching it on TV, half loved it, I remember a DVD review on Amazon calling Biggles the Thunderbirds of its day. I'd argue it's a better film than most people give it credit for, certainly miles better than Jonathan Frakes' 2004 Dross. The acting by Hyde White and Dixon is good along with the other actors. Dixon portrays Biggles exactly how he's supposed to be in the books, and it has some terrific lines. Upon coming across a test site blasted by the Germans' sound weapon, Jim remarks, "It looks like the place got nuked." When Biggles asks what that means, Jim responds with, "Oh, it's an American slang word. It means to overreact." The song Do You Want to Be a Hero, while repeated ad nauseum in the movie, might just be one of the best top 5 movie songs of all time. The time travel parts lead to some of the most inane and hilarious parts of the movie. They really couldn't make a movie like this today, but they should. There's stuff that makes totally no sense, but you forgive it because the film is so well-meaning. Above all, for a film often criticized for not being faithful to the books, the movie, when it comes to its characters, is completely faithful to the books. They didn't change anything, really, that was in the books. They just added some time travel in contemporary times. Some will argue that it embarrasses the movie or that Biggles becomes relegated to being a supporting character in his own film. I strongly disagree. The Biggles movie is an oddity, but a worthy, well-made oddity. Highly recommended to be watched at least once with an open mind. Kind regards, Pedro. Dude, I have never heard of this movie, but I will tell you what. I'm going to go watch it. I'm going to go watch it now. Maybe not right now because I'm doing the show, but maybe soon. I got to go find this. I can't believe I have never heard of this before, but oh my God. This next one comes from Velociraptor. Hi, Rob. Rob, hi there. You probably don't remember me, but I've written you a couple of letters in the past, at least one of which was read on air. Admittedly, while I've been a viewer of your channel since 2018, I've taken plenty of sabbaticals, and sometimes long ones, from your content. That shouldn't be taken as a commentary on the quality of your show. Actually, I love your show. The main reason I've taken breaks from your channel is because I have a YouTube and podcast addiction that I'm often trying to fight. Now, I think my addiction is pretty harmless compared to other kinds of addictions. Perhaps it may not even be an addiction. You see, I only have maybe 3 real friends, and I don't see any of them very often. I haven't seen 2 of them since 2019. I think that listening to you and others online is something that gives me the feeling of friendship and conversation, without it being entirely real. Anyway, I wasn't planning to write to you about that. My point is that you haven't heard from me in almost a year because I haven't spent a whole lot of time on your channel in the past year, despite the fact that I was planning to become more involved with the Post-Geek Singularity community when I last wrote to you. But that's enough preamble. Spider-Man is the topic this letter is supposed to be about. Ever since your December 17th spoiler video about No Way Home, I've been wanting to write in. Spider-Man has been my favorite fictional character since I was very young. One of my earliest memories of watching a particular Doc Ock episode of the 1990 Spider-Man cartoon. I have another early memory of my parents taking me to see Spider-Man 2 when I was about 5 years old. According to my mom, I'd seen the first film already and wanted to see the second. When Doc Ock lit up his artificial sun for the first time and it started to get out of control, I freaked out. My mom had to take me out of the theater. Despite what my mom said about why I wanted to see Spider-Man 2, my first memory of seeing the original Spider-Man movie is from when I was about 6 or 7. I saw it on VHS or DVD, and I absolutely loved it. My reaction was as if it was the greatest thing I'd ever seen. I think that was the night which embedded Spider-Man in my mind as my favorite character. During my summer break between 1st and 2nd grade, I literally got up every single morning at about 6 a.m. without an alarm or anyone waking me up, and I watched the entirety of Spider-Man. It got to a point where I knew the lines and would say or maybe just mouth or think them along with the characters. My favorite scene, I think, was the scene where the Green Goblin confronts Spider-Man on a rooftop at night and tries to convince him that they should team up. In the years since then, I've kept up with all of the Spider-Man movies and some of the cartoons. Shout out to Spectacular Spider-Man, which I think is the best of the cartoons. I like Spider-Man 3 and both of the Amazing Spider-Man movies whenever I first saw them, although I later soured on them. Admittedly, it's been maybe 5 years since I've seen any of the non-MCU Spider-Man movies, so I don't really know what I would think of them now. That said, I've seen them all multiple times, so I had very little difficulty understanding what Spider-Man No Way Home's alternate universe villains were talking about when they would reference previous Spider-Man film continuities. Even so, on my first watch, I didn't worry too much about the details. I just let that movie wash over me. Spoilers ahead. Upon my first viewing of Spider-Man No Way Home, I was pleased with the film and ready to forgive or make excuses for any minor continuity errors it might have had. For instance, even before watching the movie, I'd heard that Doc Ock's costuming, in particular his glasses, didn't line up with the idea of him being taken from Spider-Man 2 during his final showdown with Spider-Man. But I found the movie so delightful that I didn't really care. I thought, hey, I'll just assume this Doc Ock was pulled from a universe that was roughly the same as the Spider-Man 2 universe, but not exactly the same. As an aside, I'm currently going back and forth on that idea. On one hand, actually, I think you could make the argument if you were trying to negotiate a contract, Marvel would say, this isn't exactly the same character he played in Spider-Man 2. It's from a different universe, so technically we're not bringing him back, which means his quote can't be that high because he's a new version of the character he once played, but not the same version. I don't know if that logic would fly, but I'd be curious if someone tried. But I found the movie delightful, and I didn't really care. As an aside, I'm currently going back and forth on that idea. On one hand, Tobey and Andrew's appearances are tied so much to them being from previous Spider-Man franchises that it would be strange to say they aren't exactly from those franchises. On the other hand, as I think is apparent in their first scene, their characters have been tweaked to fit within the style of the MCU. Plus, going back to the villains, it's really strange that Sandman could look fully human in Spider-Man 3 but can't now until being cured. Of course, I'm sure there's a practical behind-the-scenes reason for this, but it makes one wonder. Even so, if electricity can be different in the MCU, maybe sand can be too. Returning to my original line of thought, I really like this movie, and I find it to be an extremely joyful watch. However, there is one big potential problem with No Way Home that stuck out to me even during my first viewing. I just didn't dwell on it first because I saw it only as a potential problem, and I wanted to give the writers the benefit of the doubt. Unfortunately, this potential problem only got more worrisome to me as the movie came to a close, and then actively started to bother me after I left the theater. The potential problem is something I surprisingly haven't heard anyone else bring up, except for someone who wrote to you in your December 17th show and briefly mentioned it, and that's why I had to write this letter. So what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about Doctor Strange's second spell, the one he crafted atop the Statue of Liberty. Let's forget that he conjured up this spell without the floaty altar thing that he used for the first spell. I want to get to the big issue here. Why on earth did he need to cast the spell he did? To review, the original spell can't be reversed because Green Goblin blew up the spell reverse machine. We get Doctor Strange lines from the trailer. They're all coming through and I can't stop them. Okay, so Spider-Man goes to Strange and he's trying to sew up the dimensional tears in the sky and asks, to quote the scene roughly, "Can't you just cast the spell again, but in the original way, like before I messed it up?" Strange replies, "No, they're already here. They're here because of you." Peter then asks, "Well, what if you make everyone forget who I am? That would work, right?" Strange says, "Yes, but then everyone who loves and cares for you would forget who you are." Peter then tells him to go ahead and cast the spell, and he consents. While that replay was not exact, I think it should serve its purpose well enough. Notice how within seconds, Peter figures out how to fix the problem at hand. So it must be a simple fix, right? Well, then why do I have no idea, after seeing the film 5 times, the reason that this is the spell that makes sense in this situation? One thing I've understood since my first viewing is that the new spell is more extreme than the original spell. From a dramatic point of view, I get the need for this. In addition, the spell gives Peter a chance to make a better choice than he did at the beginning of the movie. I get the structural purpose of this, but within the logic of the movie's universe, I don't get it. Toward the beginning of the movie, Doctor Strange claims that all the alternate universe villains that were pulled into the MCU were snagged because they knew Spider-Man as Peter Parker. I can buy that the spell ended up doing this because the spell is focused around the connection of his identities, Peter Parker and Spider-Man. I can also buy that Strange is a good enough doctor or wizard to be able to diagnose what went wrong with the spell. After the spell gets loose, thanks to Gobby, the magic starts pulling in the infinite number of multiversal villains who know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. When Strange claims that this spell cannot be reversed by casting a pristine version of it, well, that makes sense to me. The first spell is already doing its magic, so every villain has already been grabbed, or several of them at least, making them forget the identity connection now would give Peter some privacy from these villains, but they would still be transported into the MCU. So obviously, the solution here is for Strange to make everyone, these villains included, forget who Peter Parker is, right? Well, I don't see how. Making them forget who Peter Parker is would have been essentially the same effect as making them forget knowing Parker is Spider-Man. If they don't know who Peter Parker is, how could they know he's Spider-Man? Strange's second spell is just a more punishing version of the first spell. It serves no practical purpose that the first spell does not. At least, that's my conclusion. Please, Rob, tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm missing something obvious and monumentally important. I feel like I must be, but I've been racking my brain and I can't figure this out. I guess I should bring this letter to a close since it's already very long, but I have plenty more I could say about No Way Home and about other topics. I may have a special place in my heart for Spider-Man, but I like all kinds of movies. I have a Regal Unlimited membership and I've seen lots of movies this year. My number one movie of the year is The Card Counter, which I see you recently got on Blu-ray, which I can't wait to watch. Also up high are The House of Gucci, Nightmare Alley, King Richard, and Dune. I look forward to potentially writing letters about those films and other topics, such as Star Trek. Rob, thank you for reading my letter, and thank you for your show. Until next time, Velociraptor. Well, a great article, a great letter. Thanks for writing in. I have been talking. I did 4 hours of companion videos for John Campea, and a lot of people were discussing the very thing. The logic behind all of this and the logic of the multiverse, I thought was a bit, let's call it nebulous. So I don't think that I can offer any insight that would satisfy these questions you have, because these questions you have are very valid. And I think the idea of wish fulfillment, to me, I look at it this way. I look at kind of the way that we deal with time travel in movies. You kind of understand it, sort of, maybe, but I don't know. It's hard. You just have to assume, well, it worked. So I guess you'd have to reverse engineer this. Like someone asked in the things, would the Peter Parkers? Here's what I love about science fiction, fantasy, and horror movies, and this is why, as a fan, I like these kinds of conversations. So somebody posited the idea, actually many people did, that would the Peter Parkers that Doctor Strange, with the Tobey Maguire Peter Parker and the Andrew Garfield Peter Parker, also forget our Peter Parker, or that they even are Peter Parker? And I would say that they probably either they would or they wouldn't. I would assume probably that they would, but then they would remember that they worked with a Peter Parker in an alternate universe and he must be them. That's probably what they would figure. Now, how all of that would work, so they would forget the Peter Parker that they met, but they would remember that they were fighting alongside Spider-Man, and then they would both assume, well, if that must be another version of us. I mean, I don't know. Do they remember they even were with Doctor Strange and the spell was cast because they saw Doctor Strange casting the spell while they were fighting alongside other... It's tough. My only answer to it all is magic. And to quote one of the warriors who was asked all about Cyrus, his only answer was magic. Whole lot of magic. And that's about all I can say. But what a great letter. And, yeah. So, thanks for that one. This next letter comes from Ole. Ole writes this. Hello, Robert, and Happy New Year. First, I'd like to file a complaint. After starting to watch you and Az on Fully Articulated and Hot Toys, you and your co-host Az have cost me thousands of dollars in hot toys. These wonderful little toys, I love them. I'm writing to you because something strange happened to me the other day. I got a PM on Instagram from a complete stranger yelling at me for liking one of Gal Gadot's posts on there. The message contained a load of BS about how Gal is a former IDF member, murdered Palestinians, and was a truly evil person. Uh-oh. At first I got angry, and I thought, who is this? See you next Tuesday. I was just about to write something angry back, and then Streaky the Super Cat gave me the evil eye, and I calmed down. I pressed ignore, block. Now, this individual took time out of her life to go onto one of Gal Gadot's posts on Instagram, see who likes it, and send them angry messages. I can only assume it wasn't just me. Funny enough, this isn't the first time something like this has happened to me. You see, I'm a huge Pink Floyd fan, And in 2017, I went to New York City to see Roger Waters, the bassist in Pink Floyd. Oh, I know. To see his Us and Them tour. And outside the arena, there were a couple of Jews protesting Roger because they accuse him of being anti-Semitic for his views on the ongoing conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. Obviously, they had to stop random people, accusing them of being anti-Semitic too, as they were going to see Roger's show. I usually get annoyed when people stop me on the street for political and religious reasons, but we were going to the bar and I didn't have time to deal with it. It was just when I got the message from that angry lady above, I remembered it. So I have encountered pro sides and against sides in the same conflict, and neither of them left a good impression on me, to be honest. So I didn't think any of them are interested in hearing what the other side's arguments are. I mean, I could easily argue with the angry lady. You see, I know that Israel has, like Norway and many other countries, mandatory military service. If you deny that, you may go to prison. So I would imagine that Gal Gadot, like me, did her obligated military service and went on with her life. But really, do I care? No. I like Gal Gadot because she has great legs, looks like a god, and, well, is a god. Her Wonder Woman hot toy from Batman v Superman stands proudly in my shelf. And while I don't necessarily agree with Roger's policies with Israel, do I care? No, not really. You see, I've never seen his legs, and I really like Pink Floyd. And he wrote all the lyrics for Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, Animals, and The Wall. One could argue he's one of the greatest rock and roll lyricists of all time. I will, to the end, always wonder what makes people contact people they do not know and lecture them on what they should like or shouldn't like. I, for instance, don't fancy Amy Schumer. I just don't think she's funny, which is very important for a comedian to be, and neither do I care for her politics. But I would never in my life walk up or write a message to someone who does like her and tell them not to. Anyway, I really like your channel and keep up the good work. Your friend, Ole. I say Ole because it's O-L-E, but it could be Oli, a.k.a. the Norwegian Kryptonian. You've been around for a while, my friend. P.S. There is no dark side of the moon, really. As a matter of fact, it's all dark. Well, again, that's kind of what I was talking about earlier. I don't think that going to a concert, a Pink Floyd concert, a Roger Waters concert, actually, and bringing politics into it, you're going to convince anybody of anything. Again, I think it's important that both sides, look, I'll flat out say I'm a Zionist. Flat out. I'm a Zionist. I'm a Zionist because I was raised a Jew, and I met too many people that were either concentration camp survivors or were family members of concentration camp survivors, or people that, let's just say I heard a lot. And the fact is, there are probably around 20 million Jews left on Earth. And while I do believe that they should have their homeland, they've been embattled since they got there. And there's a lot of, I do not want to wade into the political situation there, but there have been many efforts to try and have a two-state solution, and for whatever reasons, and I won't get into them here, there isn't one. And there's a lot of acrimony on both sides, and there's a lot of good points on both sides as well. I don't think either side has done a particularly great job of preventing what happens there on a daily basis. But that's just me. And it's a difficult and not the greatest situation in the world. I would prefer that there is a solution, and I would prefer that people have the right to live in peace and all of that. But it's a tough situation, and one that I don't see being solved. But yes, I don't think that trolling people that go on Gal Gadot's Instagram page or go see a Roger Waters concert is an effective means. I mean, I will say this. It might get people that aren't aware of the difficulties that are faced by the Palestinian people, or the things that Israel has to endure: crops burned down, buildings shelled, missiles falling on civilian areas, which shouldn't have to happen. And the Palestinians, I'm sorry, but they've elected a terrorist organization that in their charter has demanded the destruction of Israel. So on both sides, it's not a great situation. But I don't think it can be solved. The best thing about that is that it makes people aware of these things, and I think people should be aware of these things, and hopefully you'll look into both sides of this conflict and make up your own minds. But yeah, I don't think... I mean, look, I think a lot of what goes on today, what our discourse is all about, is it's very hard to find self-worth in our world today. It's very difficult. And I think an easy way of finding self-worth is to create personas, online personas, or if you want to virtue signal or you want to tell other people how they're bad. It's an, you know, to me, it's almost, it's like the Force. There are easy and quick and more seductive ways to use the Force, and telling people what they should go do with themselves or telling people they are bad for whatever reason so you feel better is an easy way out, and it's easier and more seductive. I don't agree with it, but I can understand why it happens. Anyway, I want to say thanks for writing in, and let's see what you guys have to say. Let's go to the tote. Speaking of which, Martino. Hello, Martino. I'm loving your pictures, casting me as a Playmobil person. I have opened up and put together the DB5. I love it. It's so much fun to have. So thank you for the continued support. Sends in a tip. And thank you for that, Martino Beal. That's a man. I missed your intellectual boosters, my brain and morality. Thank you. Well, Martino, you are way too kind, sir. The ongoing support of this channel and your extended friendship. The thing is, here's the thing, though, dude. I mean, you've been so nice and generous to both me and Az, but don't think that I'm not coming over to Europe. And I expect to drive all your cars and go to the dam. I'll be very hospitable and clean up after myself, but I'm going to show up and be there for 2 weeks. And you're going to be finally, Rob, don't you think it's time for you to go? And I'm like, no, man, let's take that Lotus 7 around just one more time. Come on, can't we drive around all those awesome mountain roads? But you're very nice, and thank you so much. I can't thank you enough. Fernando Barrero. Hello, Fernando. Hi, R&B. Happy 2022. Nice hoodie. Yes, Fernando, where did I get this hoodie? I wonder. Oh, wait. I got it from you. I love this hoodie. It's fantastic. By the way, it's also very warm. It's very good. It's a good hoodie. I've actually worn it 2 days in a row, to be honest. I love this. So thank you for that. I finally caught up with The Expanse. What are your thoughts on the show so far? Also, what was your favorite film and best film of 2021 in your opinion? And although late, I've started binging Succession on HBO Max. Ooh, a lot of questions there. Let's see. Well, first of all, I have to say I find the final season of The Expanse honestly disappointing. It's felt like one single episode that's being dragged out. You know, one of the great things I've loved about The Expanse is you had Mars, you had the Earth, you had the Belt, you were jumping all around. It just feels like a much different show than it felt in the first couple seasons. It feels much smaller. And look, I understand that they're following the books, but even the books, the whole Marco Inaros, it had a lot more going on. I mean, I feel they've truncated the 6 books so much. And Marco Inaros is I just can't wait to see him die. And I would rather have them make him more sympathetic as a revolutionary, because he also has good points to make. But once you've killed millions of people on Earth, it's like, get rid of that guy. But it's not like it's bad. I mean, I love Drummer's speech in the last episode, but there's only 2 more episodes of The Expanse forever. And I feel like this 6th season, I've just been watching one long episode the whole time. I don't feel the richness of The Expanse. It's still been pretty good, but, you know, when they're preaching to me about the horrors of war, it's not like anything I haven't seen before. So, My favorite film of the year is still that I've seen is still Tick, Tick, Boom. I really loved Tick, Tick, Boom. It's not getting a lot of love. I don't think it's going to get a lot of love at award time, but I really loved it. It kind of just spoke to me. It's probably my favorite film. What is the best film? I don't know. What is the I can't really answer the best film. I haven't seen enough of the films yet. I mean, I've seen a lot of movies I thought were really good this year. I really liked everything from, on one hand, the scale and scope of Dune to a movie like King Richard, where I thought Will Smith was just incredible in that role. But there's been a lot of interesting movies. I mean, One Night in Soho was all over the place, but I liked it. Nightmare Alley was not as good as I had hoped it would be. I put it up there with Crimson Peak. I think they're kind of misses for Guillermo, but I enjoyed them. I've loved all 4 movies to varying degrees that Marvel put out this year. So the comic book films I've seen, I enjoyed. And I finished all 3 seasons of Succession. I binged them over the last month. I loved it. Loved Succession. And I loved the season 2 and season 3 endings. And quite enjoyed them. Lieutenant Commander Salinga. By the way, Fernando, I didn't want to do this without asking you, but what if we did a giveaway for your Citizen Kane disc, since I have 2 of them, and we could have a Borrero giveaway or something like that, but I'll leave that up to you to decide. Lieutenant Commander Salinga says the problem with some complaints about censorship. The right to freedom of speech does not mean the right for worldwide, publicized, or therefore amplified speech by private corporations using their resource for free, but many see this as being equal. I think it's one of the. I think the ethics, the ethics of our big tech and our biotech, medical ethics in the next 50 years and the ethics of speech in the next 50 years are going to be 2 of the great societal. Now, I'm not talking about clean potable water or those kinds of things. I'm just speaking about the fabric of our society. Hopefully that people are healthy and can exist in a society, but now that they can exist, what are we going to do about freedom of speech, and what are we going to do about censorship? And the idea, look, it is very troublesome already on the YouTube platform that I can be, or our shows can be taken down for things that we say. And I think, I'll wonder, because I mentioned the name of Norman Mailer's, if this actual, it'll be interesting to see if this particular show will get flagged for demonetization because I mentioned the name of that essay. And it could very well be demonetized, which is silly because that's the name of an actual printed essay. That's the most, but you never know. Now, and that idea, there's just analytics that say certain things can't be said, and which is bizarre, but we're going to have to sort this stuff out. And as we get better and better biotechnology, I guess CRISPR and gene splicing, are we going to allow people to have designer children? Which I think is absurd unless you can prevent medical conditions, but I don't think we should ever allow, I'd love it if my daughter had green eyes. I think if we're going to start doing that, that's antithetical to nature, but what do I know? Not much, to be honest, but we shall see. Stubble McShave sends in a tip and says, so episode 778, huh? Any plans for 800? Doing episodes that's as many minutes are not sustainable anymore. It worked up to 400 and 500. So what Stubble is saying, for those of you who are new to the channel, I did, for the 400th episode, I did a 400-minute episode, and for the 500th episode, I did a 500-minute episode. They were tough. They were really hard. It's hard to sustain that. Maybe I'll try something new. It was fun to do a bunch of interviews, though. I thought the 400th episode was really, really good, and I got some really, I had some really individual episodes, good interviews for those episodes. So I enjoy those. Our friend Mike Lito says Lin-Manuel Miranda is a slacker. In The Heights, Vivo, and Canto, and our favorite Tick, Tick, Boom, he needs to work harder on producing content. He does. Well, maybe Stubble, I'll work harder and make some more interviews for the 800th show. So I don't know what I'm going to do yet. I don't know what I'm going to do. But can you believe Lin-Manuel Miranda, Mikey? I mean, that's a lot of work. Speaking of work, I want to remind everyone that the second season of Dota, Dragon's Blood, the animated series that I've worked on, is going to drop this month. Check it out. I think it's pretty cool. And yeah, so thanks for all that. And all these people, look at all these people that up their memberships. Anthony Mendoza, the Big Sleepy, Jack Wallace, Justin Jorgensen, Thomas Bennett. Jack, how, I want to know what hot toy did you get? Aiden a hot toy. Thomas Bennett, Claudia Padilla, Nick Parrish, Fernando Barrero, Hosea Perry, Raygun Media Productions, Turk 187, John 24 became a member. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. By the way, member call this weekend coming up. As you know, if you're a member of the channel, we have these. There's going to be. I'm going to start dropping some small videos that are going to be member exclusive videos for a while. That'll be fun to do. But yeah. So, gosh, I mean, I don't know what more to say other than that. For the 800th show, I don't know what to do. And Lin-Manuel Miranda, you're right, Mikey. He is a slacker. And listen, just wanted to, I don't like to get totally political on this show, but it is worrisome to me. And I just see so much going around about what you can and can't say. And I know that there's a lot of things. I'm not interested in real disinformation. And that's what I mean. I don't think we can, you can't, if someone's going to offer disinformation, the only way to combat disinformation is a credible defense of the truth. And I think we need to do that. And I think, one of the things about the Matrix Resurrections that I really liked the Matrix, and I want to say that I like that movie a lot more than a lot of people did, obviously. But I think one of the things about The Matrix that I enjoyed was this idea that we're all living in our own truths now. And I think that's really dangerous. There is an objective truth to the universe. There has to be. Objective truths like human beings need clean water and food in order to survive. That is an immutable truth about the universe. And I think there's no way around that. And there are other truths like that as well. And yet, we're living in a world where truth is increasingly, and if we don't have our scientific truths, and I understand, well, Rob, science isn't always exact. No, but it's provable, and it's peer-reviewed. And, it's a theory that gets repeatedly proven over and over and over again, so it's no longer a theory. But I still think it's important that we maintain the truth of our own existence, because if we don't, where are we going to be? Just something that I think that we're going to be increasingly, we have to be increasingly vigilant to protect. But anyway, I want to thank everybody for being here for the first show of the year. I want to say thanks to all of the ongoing contributions that people from the Post-Geek Singularity make, whether it's super chats or tips. Thank you so much. But really, it's the discourse. I think the best thing, honestly, about this channel is all of you. All of you imagination connoisseurs, all of you members of the Post-Geek Singularity. If you want to send me letters, you can do so at the website, theburnettwork.net. I will read them live. Ooh, you know what? Speaking of that, it wouldn't be... Wait a minute. I forgot to do something. You know what I forgot to do? I have another letter that I need to read, and I know you all want to hear it because I forgot. Let's see. Hang on. I have a letter that I can't not read. Let me see. And it's from Omar. 94. Oh, wait a minute. You know what? This is for Let's Get Physical Media. I'll wait. I'll wait. Never mind. Never mind, Omar. I'm not going to read this letter because I'll wait because it's Let's Get Physical Media. But it wouldn't be a Let's Get Physical. It wouldn't be an episode of, what am I saying? Robservations without you, sir. But I want to thank everybody for writing in and keep the discourse going, all the conversation happening. It's fantastic. And there's we were going over, there is some incredible films coming out. And John Campia asked me today on his show, what are my top 10 eagerly awaited movies of the year. And what was interesting is when he asked me that, I said, you know what, I'm not going to have any comic book movies, and I forgot a lot. But I didn't want to have any even though I love comic book movies, I just wasn't going to put those up there. So I just looked into it and just did a cursory top 10. Here's my top 10 movies of the year. And if you're not excited about this lineup, and there's amazing movies coming out, like Olivia Wilde's new film, and there's so many great. There's a foreign film, I want to say it's called Pink Cloud, that I really want to see. That's coming out this year too. But here's my quick top 10 films that I want to see in 2022. Honorable mention, The Fabelmans, which is Steven Spielberg's movie about his own young life. Bardo, Alejandro Inarritu's new movie. I guess Bardo means it's like a phrase. It means a bag of half full truths or something. There's Ari Aster's Disappointment Boulevard. Have no idea what it's about, but it's Ari Aster, who made Hereditary and who made Midsummer. Go see that. Top Gun Maverick, Joseph Kosinski's sequel to Top Gun, which everyone says, John Campea raves about what they saw at CinemaCon. Can't wait to see that. I can't even believe it got made, kind of like Spider-Man No Way Home. The Northman, Robert Eggers, who did The Witch. Can't wait to see The Northman. Baz Luhrmann's Elvis biopic. Come on now. Who doesn't want to see that? David Fincher's The Killer. Noah Baumbach's adaptation of Don DeLeo's book White Noise, that I actually read my senior year in high school when it came out. Or maybe I was in college. I don't know actually, but I read it in 1985 when it came out. I want to see that. Babylon, Damien Chazelle's new movie. Him of Whiplash, La La Land, and of course First Man. Damien Chazelle's new movie. Killers of the Flower Moon, Martin Scorsese's latest movie. And my number one movie of the year of 2022, don't give in to hate, Avatar 2. Why? Why do I want to see Avatar 2? Because James Cameron constantly pushes the boundaries of what's possible technically in the film business. And I want to go back to Pandora, and we're going swimming. So I can't wait. And that's just this year. And this is just a fraction of the cool stuff coming out. I mean, we got Morbius coming out in a week. We got Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. We got Thor Love and Thunder. We've got The Flash. We've got The Batman. I mean, there's a lot of cool shit. I'm very, very excited for 2022. I'm very excited to go along this journey with all of you. You know what? It's not going to be a year where you're going to get the phantasm silver sphere in your head. We're better than that. It's going to be a good year, everybody. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And I want to shout out to the moderators. Brian Hepburn is here. Greg Smith is here. My friend Greg is doing well, which is good to hear. Darren Seeley is here. I don't know if Louise X. Sparrow was here, but she might have been. Yes, she is. Lord Toth is here. Justin Toner's here. Got you all here. Anyway, it's going to be a good year, everyone. And let's all take that journey together and see where it leads us. And on that note, I'm going to have a little nosh with my good friend Michael Davis, who made the movie Shoot 'Em Up. Wait till you see his next project. He has spent the last 5 years hand animating a movie. Well, I can't say who it. Well, it's about Richard Nixon. It's incredible. Incredible. I hope it comes out soon. And on that note, I guess I already said everything I need to say. So I will see you back tomorrow on the John Campea Show. For those of you who want to know my new schedule, it is true. I am back on the John Campea Show 4 days a week. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. On Wednesdays, I'll be streaming with Az. I will still be on Justin's shows and Lael's shows and doing all that stuff. But John Campea, he godfathered me. He made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And I have to say, if you've ever tuned into the John Campea Show, I thought today's show with Ray and Kimberly, who I believe is one of the most photogenic people I've ever seen in my life, we had a great time. It was a different vibe, different show. It was a lot of fun. So there you go. And hope to see you on the morrow.